Okay, so I told you the other day that Imogen was starting a business.
Oh yeah, you were telling our guest about that. Yeah.
So she has started a business where you buy a book and you get a highlighter and some chocolate and a bookmark and some stickers. 20 quid, mystery book.
Nice.
Get the whole pack. So I said, just be realistic about this. You kind of words of wisdom, I thought. She sold 2 already. She's already made her initial investment back. She had a package that arrived today from Amazon with all the stuff that she's bought herself. And she's already...
That's impressive.
So anyway, I was like blown away by it. Thought, there we go.
Very proud of her.
13 years old, already making profit.
Firstly, that's amazing. And secondly, it chastens us business consultants that if the client always listens to the consultant, they'll definitely go bust. If they never listen to the consultant, they only might go bust.
And if you're doing it at age 13, you don't need to have any consultants.
You don't, and you certainly don't need that.
No, exactly. So I said, what's your margins? She goes, I don't know, for about £7. Yeah, about £7 margin per book. So I thought, yeah, okay.
I bet she knows the difference between margin and markup.
Yeah, maybe. Let's not push it.
That's like homework. Any particular themes of the books, or is it proper?
No, it's a mystery. Well, she's made a website where you put in what you like, genre, and then she picks a mystery book for you from that genre. And then you get a pack with chocolate and a highlighter and a bookmark and stickers and your book.
Terrific.
20 quid. So there we go.
I think we need to give updates on this through the series, through our podcast series.
I think in 6 months' time we'll be like, right, we've got to stop this now because we're going to work for Imogen.
Yeah, we're working for your daughter.
We'll be in the warehouse.
Unless you just moved from an expense to an investment.
Imogen, if you're watching, well done. Fantastic. We're very proud of you. We'll keep an eye on that. Right, well, on that, should we start a podcast then? Hello and welcome to the SME Growth Podcast for another episode. We have another guest in this week. So as part of our general theme from what Wellmeadow produces, we're trying to come up with new interesting stuff that you as business owners and managers might find useful on your journey to grow. So with me, alongside me here is Richard, who you know very well, but our guest over here is Archi Stewart.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Richard.
Welcome to the show. We're honoured to receive such royalty here today. Now, Archi, we've known Archi for a long time, I should explain, in business consulting circles, as Archi alluded to in our little intro chat there. But interestingly, Archi's got a number of different business areas that he's been involved in on a more personal basis rather than just advising others with businesses. And we wanted to talk about one or maybe two of a theme, about one area today, because it's really, really interesting. It's really different. It's a bit off the wall. And the lessons you've learned, I think, can be applied across a number of different areas. So hopefully listeners will understand why we've chosen to bring you in today by the time they get to the end of it.
Firstly, thank you. As an avid listener, the honour is mine.
An avid listener.
You're the one.
You're the one that keeps sending those letters in, are you?
Avid listener of Mansfield, yeah.
Yeah, it's come a long way as well to be a guest today. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about then is that you bought 2 businesses close together, or exactly the same time, I don't know, but in the same year, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, almost exactly right. So with friends, we bought 2 businesses in 2020. One as COVID could have been a thing, and we had the foresight to put in somewhere in the contracts that if it was a thing, then things might be slightly different in the deferred elements of the purchase, but happily never had to exercise that, even though COVID was very much a thing, and one when it was clearly going to be a thing. But yeah, in the same year, we bought 2 international events companies, just looking down the barrel of COVID.
Brilliant. Now, anybody watching the video of this will be able to tell just by looking at you that you're a finely tuned athlete.
Was. Maybe.
A little bit of background here, as Archie's just said, you bought 2 events. Now, we're talking running events here, and you are the veteran. I think it's worth just explaining a little bit for listeners, the veteran of some pretty amazing events yourself as a competitor.
Yeah, so hardly an original story, hit mid to late 30s and recognised I'd moved from plump or portly to fat, and there was no obvious other adjective that was pleasant to hear.
I'm sure we would disagree. I'm sure we knew about then.
And quite good fun, really. One of the younger, earlier career members of my then team, a former professional footballer, Mr. Jeffries, suggested that the gaffer ought to lose a bit of timber, and he was in the same boat.
Oh, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in that discussion, wouldn't you?
He was in the same boat. He knew because his ex-partner had told him so. That was her line as he took his suitcase down the path. Oi, and you were ripped when I met you, and now you're not. So he decided to pass that on, and we started going to the gym together. And I've quickly realised he liked anything showy, anything that led to big muscles, but he loathed anything that was the treadmill or the bike or whatever. So he humiliated his boss on all the various lifts and what have you, and I sought revenge on the treadmill, and we both decided we didn't like the treadmill, and then we started running around the block before we started doing gym stuff, and then we found we were doing more running and less gymming and all the rest of it. And then again, hardly an original story, but I think that my observation around runners is that they tend to go off on two paths. Some runners are just become obsessed about time, and doesn't matter what distance of event they're into, it's always about beating the last time.
PBs all the time. Yeah, PB.
Definitely, we've all met those. And then others, I think, and it's probably more common than the other nowadays, as the club runner diminishes and the trail runner and the ultra runner increases. I think more people get obsessed now with how far they can travel, and that was the route that I picked. So,
but you didn't just pick a marathon, did you? Any more normal person, I've never done a marathon. I thought a half was pretty good going, but I might one day stretch to a marathon. That would be it. That'd be the peak. But you started out thinking, nah, marathons.
You say that, and that's it's the running bug is virulent, and so yes, very, very quickly in the same year, 5K, 10K, half marathon. I wonder if you can go beyond that, and does it exist? And of course it does exist. It wasn't so common then, it was slightly more counterculture then. So 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles, what's further than 100 miles? And you start to run out of those in the UK, and then you start to cast overseas, and of course then you come across James Cracknell running through the Sahara, running the Marathon des Sables, which most people have heard of as one of the toughest foot race.
You told us I had at least heard of it, not some of these other ones you've done, but yeah, it's got quite a ferocious reputation.
Yeah, so then you do that, and that was actually mildly okay, wasn't?
Oh no, just for listeners here who haven't heard of a marathon, to talk about modesty. This is 8 marathons in 7 days in the desert, and you have to carry all your kit and food with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Just stroll in the park, really. I mean, anybody listening to this will think, I'll have a go at that.
I think it's excessive.
How long after you started running was this event?
2 and a bit years.
Okay, we'll all take a breath. And that's not the only one of these you've done. That's the desert version.
Didn't you run around a 400-metre track for 24 hours?
Yeah.
That was always the one that I thought was just absolutely mind-numbingly just...
They're terrific. I mean, they're amazing. Yeah.
Mentally put yourself through the grinder.
You do start to seek out the different varieties, and I've got lots of friends who also run events companies, and there's lots of these different varieties. But most people go on the same journey, Marathon des Sables. They survive that, or they think that was okay, and then they go in search of something that's maybe a bit tougher. And somebody talked about, I think it was at a friend's 50th, and they were talking about the Jungle Ultra through the Amazon. So that seemed quite appealing.
So you just did one of them then?
So we did that, and that was terrific. And we found this really nice company Beyond the Ultimate that was different, entirely different to Marathon des Sables, which is a tremendous circus. It was in the year that we ran it, there was, I say we are, you get bonded to your tent. So I think of Tent 126, and the people in that are almost all still close friends. And the year that, our year 2014, there was 1,300 people in that event, and you get a really terrific sort of esprit de corps across the whole event.
Sounds like an amazing atmosphere it must be there. Where is it based?
That's the Moroccan Sahara. The course changes every year. It was its history is interesting. It was a French concert promoter, a guy called Patrick Bauer, who happened to find himself in the Moroccan Sahara, went on a long walk, 400 kilometres. He found that carrying what you needed was difficult. He found finding water was difficult, but the whole desert landscape spoke to his soul, and he came out of it a different person. And to his great merit, within 2 years, he'd set up what is now the Marathon des Sables, and must be close to its 40th year if it hasn't gone beyond already. And he then came up with this format that many people have copied, which is around about 250 miles over. His format was over 7 days and 6 days of running with a rest day in the middle. And that's most people's entry, and that's what they've heard of, and there's lots of TV stuff about that. And then if they don't die or they enjoy that kind of stuff, and then you look for stuff typically that's harder. And for me, the jungle felt that was probably fitted the bill. Did okay at that, so got a false sense of
yes, you won the prize for having the lightest pack on.
So I'm sort of relatively well known for kind of that. I find it easier to shave the weight in the pack than the person's. So good, but it's interesting, and I think that's why it appeals to people who maybe entered running later, that there's a bit more to it about the self-discipline of self-sufficiency, the kit choices, the food choices, the personal administration. So it's rather pleasing. The jungle was terrific. There was 2 absolutely whip-thin Danish triathletes, very south of 10-hour Ironmen, 6% body fat, fierce looking. We called one of them Robocop, and just this fierce looking specimen of a man. And you've got all of us middle-aged men in lycra going, well, that's us, there's the winner type thing. Him and his friend went off at walk pace 9 or whatever, and we all thought that would be it. And then as we came along on towards the end of day 1, and we were like, it's Robocop.
You just caught up with them.
Do you think we can catch him? Yeah, we can catch him. How long have we got? 2, maybe 3 miles. We're on a very twisty track in the Amazon. It's like, well, okay, let's catch our breath. And we've got to overtake him on a corner where we can look fresh, and we've got enough room to get round the corner and die a bit. And if we do that, he'll be demoralised enough we might just stay in front of him. And anyway, that was the whole week went that way. Off went Robocop, Keb Kabowie, if anybody remembers the pacer that Steve Ovett and Seb Coe used to use. So Robocop, Keb Kabowie went off, and we chased him down all day. The day we got lost, we passed him twice. He thought that was really quite rude. And he was just looking at these blokes, and it's like, but their body fat is like 20%. How are they passing me? Type stuff. And it wasn't hard to work out. They didn't have any caps, so they weren't dipping their buff. It's very wet environment. It's very hot, 35 degrees, nearly 100% humidity, and you're going through some, very some fire tracks, nice open running, but a lot of very dense vegetation. So we did that, enjoyed that, and then liked that company. Small, intimate races, fields of 50 or so. You got to know everybody. You got to know the staff. Very big contrast to MDS, where you've got all the razzmatazz, but you haven't got the intimacy of the event. And of course, you start to realise you're not doing this for. You're doing this for the adventure, but you're not doing it solely for the adventure. You're doing it for the type of people you meet and the camaraderie.
And that's pretty cool. Well, if anybody's just joining us, this isn't the running podcast that you've joined. This is actually a business-focused podcast, and we're going to talk about that now. But I wanted to cover that, so thank you for that, because that background, I think, sets the scene for maybe why what happened next. So I don't know quite what the trigger was, but you were intrigued by not just taking part in these sort of events, but wondering, well, who runs them then? How does that work? Does that make money? And all that sort of thing. So what was the trigger? What suddenly made you think, I could run one of these?
Yeah, so it directly came from the jungle. We met a race director. That was his first year, Chris King, now friend and partner in the businesses, alongside Simon and Andy and Phil in the 2 businesses that we co-own together. And Chris was on his beginning of his race directing career. He's got a wonderful origin story of just being in the right running shop at the right time. As the founder of Beyond the Ultimate, had decided that he was great at designing courses and establishing the idea of these races, desert, jungle, ice, and now mountain, these different environments, hostile environments, but wasn't very good at running a business. So the original investor founders had decided that was a jointly held view, and it was time for him to move on. And they'd been in the running shop and said, we talking to running shop in Sheffield, give it a name check, Accelerate in Sheffield, Stuart Hale, brilliant shop if you're a runner. So they've been out in Accelerate, and they've been having a moan about how they've managed to develop this great idea off the back of this founder, but who hadn't been able to commercialise or monetise the idea, and they were in a fairly deep hole in terms of the investment. And then the next person in the shop was Chris, and Stuart went, "You need to talk to him." Wow. And then Chris got his first gig, and little did we know.
But is ever in any doubt that luck is a major factor in how businesses grow, evolve, start? Yeah. There we were, just walked in the running shop at the right time.
And then, as the story intertwines, then I get to know Chris in the jungle, come back and run his desert race as it was then, 2 years on the bounce, 2017, 2018, and then just talking to Chris, he's like, "Oh, have you heard of the spine race? That looks brilliant. I fancy a go at the spine race. Do you fancy it, Archie? Yeah, let's have a go at that. That'd be amazing."
Spine race.
So that's 268 miles along the Pennine Way in winter. It's now got several versions. You can do the mere sprint, which is the first 46 miles.
Oh, just a Sunday afternoon.
Southern Challenger, 108, Northern Challenger, 160, or the full shebang, 268.
Which is the most popular?
The most in demand is the full race, the 268 miles. That's sold out in the form to enter takes about 2 minutes. So if we count the bit after you filled the form out, it took less than a minute to sell out this year.
Wow, how many entrants are we talking?
It's restricted to 150, but yeah.
Within a minute?
Yeah, seconds. And
who's running these races? What type of people is it?
Very, very, very broad spectrum of people. I mean, the spine race got some infamy, managed the Financial Times, Vogue, and other major papers when Jasmine Paris set the record a number of years ago, and it was the only event of its type then. In recent history, there was an American runner who set a lot of overall course records many years ago, but in recent running times of major international long distance endurance events, Jasmine Paris held the overall win and the record until this winter, when a young usurper came along and took a big chunk of time off it. But so Chris wanted to train for. We were easing ourselves in. There was no sprint at the time, so we went for the Southern Challenger. He wasn't able to compete in the end, but we got chatting business as a consequence of that. And he felt he'd matured, and he felt ready that he felt ready. He worked for the business, had a small share in the business, and the owners had a number of business interests, and he was trying to convince them that they should focus on other stuff and let him take this one forward. And I was reasonably interested, so we formed a partnership with Simon, who came along.
Could it only have happened if the three of you with your different skills and approaches had come together? Was it one of those where you needed things that the others had that you didn't have?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. It needed. Simon's an amazing marketeer, and I got the business background, and Chris had got a few years of race directing at that time under his belt. So although I've been involved in ultra running, I know the vast majority of UK race directors, and I've helped at most of them, so I've got a good sense of what goes into putting one on. I'd always sworn I would never get involved in it because it's an absolutely rubbish business when you think about it. Yeah, because you don't own the course. Most courses are public rights of way, so anybody could use them, right? Yeah. You can't afford to pay staffdom, and we spin up in the spine race. We spin up to nearly 400 volunteers over a week now to put our event on. We've almost got a two volunteer to one runner ratio at points of the week.
Incredible organisation, just recruiting, training, logistics, everything out of all of that lot.
It is absolutely amazing.
It's a very short-term thing. You say you spin them up, but it comes and goes within
7 days.
7 days, wow.
Yeah. So you spin that up, so you can't afford to pay everybody. So you don't do the course, you don't pay the staff. Anybody could actually use your course if they thought about it. So
copyable, yeah.
Very copyable. So I'm going, no, it's absolutely terrible business. Why on earth would one get involved in that?
You got involved in that.
Exactly right.
How's the business consultancy going? All this great advice that you ignored of your own.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was an abject lesson in how not to buy a business. But so. Yes, absolutely right. Serendipity, if you like, all came along. I'd run with Simon in the second desert I'd done, so we were known to each other. We'd had a few chats, and there's lots of people who were interested in joining together to buy out the previous owners. I sort of knew the previous owners through some networking, and they had some trust in doing the deal. They trusted that we would run an honest deal, and that's what we did. And we were very proud new owners.
Great. So this was all back in 2020, and you say one of the 2 races. How did the other one come about then in the same? You'd think that would be enough, right? You just bought yourself a race in COVID about to happen, all these challenges, and then you think, oh, let's buy another one before we've even got that one going.
Yeah, and those were the discussions. So absolutely, and it was on we were on a knife edge, a coin toss. Really, we don't really know each other as partners. How could we? Chris and I had done a fair bit of running together at that point, which helps. Lots of soggy days on the Pennine Way do help bond you together. We've been topographically challenged a few times.
You don't get lost.
Helps kind of with that kind of bonding kind of stuff. I thought you were leading the way. No, I thought you were.
Are you talking business while you're running along here? Yeah. Churning it all over in your minds?
I don't think Chris will mind. It was a bit of coaching really to a young thrusting person who got desires to be in business but didn't. But anyway, I should correct the record. He was one of the youngest gym owners in the UK, so he's good, very admirable. I think he had his own gym in Sheffield at sort of 19. So I shouldn't say he wasn't a business person, but he wasn't seasoned in the way that years put seasoning on.
More scars on your back from,
if you like.
And you mentioned earlier, there's lots of learnings from how you bought both of the businesses, really, back to that point about the older you get, the more mistakes we will have made, therefore the more you've learned, right? So how would you describe, some of the key points you took away from that, from the way you bought them?
First question first, how did we come to buy it? And then I'll move on to the second one if you remind me of it, because I probably would have forgotten.
Okay, I'll try and remember that.
So we came to buy it because I just think it is interesting. So I had separately been out on an expedition with one of the founders of the spine race, Scott Gilmore, over in Sweden, and we've been out with cross-country skis and the pulks, and we've been out in the Arctic and done a week-long expedition, -30, looking after yourself, camping, all that kind of stuff, to take on the skills as we'd sort of done hot, we'd done humid, so the only natural thing left to do was to do extreme cold. So we're out doing that, and as a consequence of, again, just that shared endeavour, when Scott wanted to sell his shares out, he lived in Norway, but the spine at the time was only operating in the UK. When he wanted to sell, he came to me and said, well, anybody would be interested in? Do you even know how do you value something that's so niche as this? And well, the answer to that is you don't. It's worth what someone's prepared to pay, but you probably just have to set out what you want and what would be right and proper for you, what would help you move on with life, and then test the market and see whether people get anywhere kind of near that. So he said, well, will you help? I said, of course, no problem, but I need to declare a bias, and this probably shouldn't happen. It might not work, because I think Beyond the Ultimate would probably, or certainly the principals behind Beyond the Ultimate, would be very interested in purchasing it. So I've got to count myself out. That's a conflict of interests. I can't on one hand sell and the other hand buy. And Scott just said, look, I utterly trust you. I don't know anybody else in business that I would trust and would ask to do this. If you say you're going to broker an honest deal, you'll broker an honest deal, and you don't know what my price is yet anyway. So that's a hurdle we've got to meet. So the clouds aligned, and we went to the market. Lots of people were interested. COVID put most people off. And then we had we had the pros and cons. A lot of the cons you've highlighted. New team, we haven't got to grips with one company yet. It wasn't in the greatest of health. It had got all of that past R&D. How do you develop a race in the depths of the Amazon with lots of cash is the answer. How do you develop a race in the wilds of the Namib Desert? Lots of cash. How do you develop a race in the mountains in America? Lots of cash, and then you realise it's not a great place to have a race. So they had a great idea, lots of past R&D. You were sailing on with some social trends. Trail running's the fastest growing sport in the world. Ultramarathons are the fastest growing part of trail running. So there was some good business stuff you could point at, and that's very McKinsey & Co.
It's definitely favourable, but not necessarily that year, but on the more macro scale.
So other people dropped out. That left us in, and we were able to meet. The price. Phil, who was the co-founder, he took that liquidity moment. He took his been in it 4 or 5 years, and it'd be nice to get some money back out. He stayed with us, and that was conditional for us. But we were still at the shall we, shan't we? And it was interesting. One of the former owners of Beyond the Ultimate, James, said, look, a very northern guy, I can't do his northern, brought up on a farm accent. I won't do it justice. But he said, look, we were in deadlock. He said, look, this is the reason you should buy the spine race. My dad doesn't run. My dad doesn't even walk yet. every year he rings me to tell me it's spine race time. Yeah. And he follows the dots. Their GPS tracks the runners over 7 days going up there. Yeah. And if it's got that social, that social awareness already.
It's like spectator sport, albeit, through the GPS.
And do you see more spectators now? I used to do a bit of fell running. Viewers won't probably believe that, but it's true.
You're quite a formidable fell runner.
I was a fell runner, but it was always, how do you monetize it? Because it was not. But is that changing now? Is that,
in terms of eyeballs on, we have 1.3 million people watch the dots.
Wow,
that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. And we have hundreds of thousands of YouTube downloads of the daily updates. We do a broadcast type quality. Will Roberts, our media man, absolutely, utterly fantastic, brings a real broadcast feel to it. Ryan Lovejoy of Outpost 9 videographer, he does an amazing job of capturing. He single-handedly drives 268 miles over or more, capturing the right spots, captures the video, edits it, and releases it same day.
You must have to just repeat bits of the journey. He's doing more than the runners are in distance, albeit by car, but with all his kit and everything else, got to get to inaccessible places. It's not, can't just pull up on the roadside, can you?
It's absolutely amazing. So that's one element. We've got massive eyeballs on, and increasingly so. And the other aspect, which is causing us some challenges now, we are looking at how we cope with spectators wanting to be on the course. Spectators now coming to roadheads.
A Tour de France type of problem.
And the roadheads don't lend themselves to it.
Well, of course, they're not going along the roads. They're just maybe crossing the road here and there. So all those cars turning up to spectate are crowding the place out for a small glimpse.
Yeah. So the second part of your question was around, what are the challenges in buying that sort of business? One is valuing it. How do you value something that's very niche and that's at very early stage? Where will trail running go? Where will ultra running go? What will COVID do to the businesses? All of that kind of stuff. So you've got the valuation side of things.
You come up with just a number in the end, or some sort of earn-out formula to de-risk it.
Yeah, it's exactly what we did. We looked at it and thought, really simple, really. That's the rosters. Where is it now? Where will it get to? They're wonderfully predictable in terms of money at the top, money in the middle, money at the bottom. You can break them into thirds, really. You've got a third which is your direct costs, a third which is your overhead, and a third in a good year which is your profit, which is the sort of numbers you need to take on that level of risk. You've got to have a decent number at the bottom to take on the level of risk that's involved in shoving 50 people into the Amazon or 500 people spread out over.
I can't begin to imagine the infrastructure you need, the planning you need, the support you need to be able to keep those people safe.
Yeah. The medics are a large part of that. That's the latest business we've gone into. We've added that onto the portfolio with friends, Dan and James. But the main lesson we learned was that the warranties are there for you. You might feel that they're there for the lawyers to pad their bill. So the incident we had with one of the co's when we bought was very tangentially. Personnel from that business had supported a household name who won't be named, who was doing a series of obstacle course races, and they tangentially had supported that as a subcontractor to a subcontractor. A lady had injured herself on her monkey bars. It turns out when you're over 40, you don't leap and swing the way that you did when you're under 10, and 3,000 people a day pretty much learned that. Only the professional obstacle course racers did in practice what was in everybody else's mind. Most people went, oh dear, can't support my own weight on one hand anymore. And she very sadly was one of those. She hurt herself quite badly, and in the vagaries of how claims work and corporate responsibility and all of that kind of stuff, and a few unfortunate incidences, that claim found us. We were lock, stock and barrel.
So was it your event?
No, it wasn't our event. We were subcontractors to subcontractors. Yeah. But we'd done a lot of the event plan. We'd done the risk assessments, and we put personnel onto the course. It was the least dangerous. I mean, this is by the judge's own summing up. He saw the least jeopardy in that particular
compared to everything else on the course.
Yep, everything else on the course, that was the least. And he found it was a great moment for, in my sense of trusting in reasonableness and common sense. And he found that there has to be a risk-reward element to it, that the event plan was excellent by his own words, and that it was just truly an unfortunate incident. The lady fell a very, very shallow distance and landed badly and hurt herself, but the personal injury lawyers got hold of it, and at the point that it found us, it was as newly minted owners of a very small niche business. It was a 1.3 million loss. We went to court and lost, and we learnt a bit about insurance. Just because you paid the money and the broker said you're insured, unless you've got the certificate, you're not. And we didn't have the certificate.
So you weren't?
So we weren't. So we had to fight it on our own wits.
Yeah.
And
This is how long after you'd bought it?
within months.
Oh my goodness, right. You immediately, so you had COVID coming on, and then this claim for 1.3 million. And even though you say we successfully defended that, you make that sound like that was just, a quick trip down to the court, sign the papers, make your argument, and off again. That presumably took quite a bit of time and energy.
Huge. I mean, it was huge, and it was sapping for everybody. And there's still a tiny little shadow on it, but in many ways, not to be too take the positive from it. It really teaches you what you've got involved with right from the beginning. As a background as a competitor,
Call for that straight away. Yeah, take this seriously, and I bet everything you've done ever since has been very, very tight. Get the documents, get everything in place.
I mean, not that we weren't, and we got amazing people on the team already. Our technical director, if anybody watched Freddie Flintoff being bungeed off a dam in a car on Top Gear, then that was his stunt. He pitched that to the BBC, he oversaw that. So got terrific people on the team, but nonetheless, so really interesting, just big lesson, the contract, this really implausible sequence of events that you would think actually should have belonged to the sellers and should have been warranted out, that any claim in the pipeline should have been dealt with by them and their insurers. Turns out wasn't, because we didn't pay sufficient. We didn't see the risk. We saw that we got the race director, so if there's any skeletons in the cupboard, he would know about them. And but it just wasn't a claim at the time. It was just timing's everything. But when you look back through the paperwork, you think we should really have warranted that out. It's nothing about the solicitors that advised us. They gave us good advice. They probably told us we should go for a heavier contract, but we were dealing with people we knew and dealing with friends, and we didn't think there was any skeletons, and there were none. But it's just a case.
It doesn't cover anything, does it? If it's not even something that your friends themselves knew about at that time, there's still so the lessons there is valuation you talked about, getting insurance, make sure you got the certificate, get the warranties in place, make sure the agreements, listen to the lawyers, I suppose, as much as we may all joke about how much they might cost us. It's there for a reason. Yeah. Especially for these riskier enterprises, I guess.
Absolutely, and then you then move into the development of the businesses, which has been it's been a great joy.
Yeah. So looking back now over the last 4 years that they've been running, how have they been going?
Yes, we're Beyond the Ultimate is close to double in size, and we've added on races to the portfolio. We kept the recipe very tight, and that's been a really key learning. The market in trail running is changing an awful lot. It's mentioned earlier, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. Lots of people are joining it, and even in the time that we've been owners, that route that we talked about earlier, which is my own personal route, is changing, where people were doing perhaps joining the running club or going through that natural half marathon, ultra marathon. What else is there? There's definitely maybe it's a post-COVID, I'm not sure, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Maybe it's the comic relief challenges, which get bigger and more exciting every year. There's definitely this life-changing experience is much more in people's consciousness, and of course people just know more people.
So do you think this is more of an entry event now then, rather than being the fifth or sixth, getting longer on the progression type event?
That's exactly what we're seeing. So we're seeing an influx of people who are just going straight for the wild, big adventure.
And can you let them do that, or are you?
Yeah, and that's the core. If you program what's the business model, you could say it's lots of things. It's we put on iconic races, so ordinary people can do extraordinary things and tell their stories. Very social media-y, kudos-y led, and there's definitely an element of that. That's definitely part of what we do. Or you could argue our business model is making it safe for people to do extraordinary things and manage that risk for them. Certainly the spine race cross-fail, which is the harshest conditions the runners face on the spine race. In this winter, the weather was, as we would say, perfect. Yeah, minus double fingers, massive wind chill, white out. And when you read runners' blogs, then their most exciting part of their race, and that's quite late in the course, they're pretty tired, very sleep deprived at that point. The front pack might take 4 to 8 hours sleep over 4 to 5 days. The winner took less than that, finished it in 4 and a bit days, slept for no more than a couple of 3 hours total. So you've got sleep deprived people towards the end of their journey on the gnarliest, the worst part of the course. And the blogs were fantastic, very rewarding for us to read as a team. And the blogs were very much, there's no way we could do that outside of the race. The trust in we have roving safety teams, we have trackers, we have a HQ coordinating everything. Everybody's a dot, 1.3 million people watching the dots, including our 24/7 HQ, and just the confidence that they had and
push themselves because they know that you're there.
Yeah, they can go and self-manage, and every one of them said in normal, if you were just out for a run or a walk, you would exit the hill, you would sensibly do that, but we provide that. So what's the heart of the business? Is it managing that risk? But also in the recipe, the two businesses are different. So one is multi-day. Clock goes, stays going for the duration, however long that duration is, whether it's 263 miles of the Pennine Way or 293 miles of the Kungsleden Trail in Arctic Sweden. Then the clock goes and you feel that time pressure. You're on an expedition, but you're racing. And you've got to manage your kit and your food and all that kind of stuff. But there are checkpoints, generously, I would say, every 50 miles or so.
Come across them all the time, one after the other.
Whereas BCU stuff's slightly different. That's multi-day, so everybody runs from point A to point B on that day, and then it hits a camp where they're treated to the great luxury of a shelter and some hot water. Everything else they must carry and look after themselves. So they're slightly different format.
A rest overnight then. So you're starting out, I won't say fresh every morning, you've just run God knows how far the day before, but it's not like the sleep-deprived Pennine Way version.
There. But I guess I think the biggest take we found, having been in it for a number of years, is what is that recipe? How do you carve out your part of that market? And it's a really fascinating time at the moment. There are a number of companies or colleagues or friends in organisers in the same industry, and they're taking a view of the appearance of that challenge, but they're going to hostile places in more clement times of the year. They're taking the lower, easier trail. They're doing some self-sufficiency, but might be moving a drop bag along the course. They're shortening the event. On the ultimate side of things, and on the spine, our natural friends in the industry or competitors, they're offering shorter versions, or one company saying, well, just decide in the morning which checkpoint you want to be inserted at and kind of run to the end type stuff. So they're going for this accessibility, and I absolutely get that. We don't diminish the challenge of the first 46 miles of the Pennine Way, and that came out of COVID. Curiously, the thing that has one of the seeds of growth in spine came out of COVID. We can't run our company for a couple of years. We can do virtual stuff, so let's do virtual spine, and you've got a month to run 263 miles in, or 100.
You don't have the safety cover or anything. You're entirely independent.
Just doing it on the streets or wherever you can. We were amazed at the uptake of that from our volunteers, who had always said, well, I'll come every year and volunteer, but I'll never run this stuff. And then they were like, well, we'll join the virtual. And one of our team, probably Phil, the co-founder over there, he thought, maybe if we do a shorter race, people will do that. And now it's just, you watch people go on these multi-year journeys, sprint, Challenger South, Challenger North, full. So what hurt us, COVID actually fed a lot of the growth. Yeah.
I've got a question. You hear a lot of people talk about following your passion and making a business out of it, that type of thing. So, and then you hear a lot of people say the other side of that, saying, well, the only people that say that are the people who've already made all their money and have got the time, to do what they want to do. So how does that fit? You're obviously passionate about running, passionate about ultra events, that type of thing. Now you've got a business in it. What's your take on following your passion and making a business out of it?
Yeah, so it's really there's many thoughts on that. It's really rich ground in many ways. First out, I definitely haven't made all the money. That's for sure.
That's why you're talking to us.
Definitely following a passion and interesting in the day job where, although I specialised in my consulting around sales predominantly and strategy probably secondary, just finding that many of the challenges that were parked at the sales door were actually upstream in clarity of strategy. So one led to the other. But in working with SMEs as an external voice, extra horsepower, however you want to describe it, it's slightly unavoidable that I'd be interested in your views on it. I found it slightly unavoidable that you became something of a generalist, a specialist generalist. So part of the attraction of the race co's was that it's specialist and I know the topic. And it is a specialism and I do absolutely kind of know it. And so that part I really enjoy, just not, there's no real mental horsepower goes into it. I'm both the customer and I've been around it a lot and know a lot of the race directors and I've been through that journey myself. So I very much enjoy the specialism. What it's totally rubbish for is staying fit and staying a runner yourself. So fill your day with your day business, fill your evenings with your secondary business.
It's not like you can just go for a run and think, oh, I'm making money out of this. It's far from it. You're running a business that's very serious with the risks involved and the logistics and just everything around it.
Yeah, I mean, happily, we're custodians of relatively big tribes, or we talk about the Spine family. We know that in the winter, over 1 million people will get invested in the event.
Do you monetize that following, or is it just the competitors themselves that are part of the financial formula?
We have some sponsorship, but it's a really interesting. Again, it's an interesting marketplace. Chastening again. So, Simon and I come from a business background. You've got Simon, Chris, and Phil, and I, and a couple of others involved in the ownership of the business. It was very much a hold our beer moment, chaps. We'll show you how to monetize this, and then you go and engage with sponsors, and you find that the value proposition on both sides doesn't really work. The sponsors haven't in the past necessarily been given enough value, so they don't offer much in return, and many races are lots of sponsors' logos and some swag bags and some prizes, so very low commitment on both sides really. The Spine race is very different. The Spine race had an early partner in Montaigne, and the races are the Montaigne Spine.
They got the naming rights for the race itself.
Yeah, absolutely, they have, and that's part of their formula for sponsorship, and they've shown us why that works for them. So they've very much grown with the brand, and we benefit enormously from their reach, and the commercials are helped by that sponsorship.
Hear from their side what they think of it. Or do they get something approaching a return on investment, however they might measure that?
Yeah, so they're in a very interesting position of where their interest lies. So I often talk about, how do the eyeballs on convert to money in the tills for them. And their marketing manager, Matt, phenomenal guy, his marketing director, his view is it's very much about pedigree. And I won't name them, but there are other comparable brands. Let's get the band back together. Brands. Those are comparable manufacturers, brands, who you will see on every TV presenter, and you will see, almost as a high street fashion item. And for them, the sponsorship of those extreme events very much is about pedigree. Keeping to the fundamentals of the business. But you definitely have to have an amount of reach for that. And we're involved. I can't. It's one of those awful beginnings to a statement. Maybe we'll come on and talk about it in a year or so's time. But we're involved in a really fascinating project, which I think is going to come to fruition, where a gentleman, an incredible businessman, Jax Davies, who is Forbes 30 and under 30, former Royal Marine, sold his first business to Berkshire Hathaway 3 years after leaving the Marines, and then set up his current business. Got very involved, very interested in marketing and promotion and used Royal Marines to go and shoot stuff in environments that your average film crew couldn't, because they could look after themselves. But then got worried about the sustainability of the marketing industry and commercial shoots and the lights, the people, the support crew, the entourage, and started doing other stuff with virtual reality, and found his way into TikTok and other social platforms, and found his way into 5 of the world's leading climate scientists, who are desperate to engage the masses in the science and solutions, but are wondering how the heck you do that. And so, as a kind of in the middle of this, Jack's an athlete. He's run one of our races, our Ice Ultra, just this year. And in the middle of that, he's saying, well, what are the social trends that get engagement at the moment? And TikTok came forward and said the biggest social trend, the thing that gets the most engagement at the moment, with the newer generations, is health and fitness, and human endeavour being part of that. And so he set out on 3 challenges. The pinnacle of which is likely to be one of our events. But it's very much about how do you use that engagement through human endeavour onto social media to connect the scientist's message with the event. So he's going to talk about climate stuff around an extreme event. So it's just a really fascinating space to be in, as we simultaneously remove the rainforests around the world, we start to melt the ice caps, and we start to have less extreme places to go and enjoy. How you could use that to engage an audience in reversing that
before it's too late. Fascinating. Well, maybe there is another episode coming up then in a year or 2.
He's much more interesting than I am too.
Well, how about you, Rich? I thought that was fascinating.
That was amazing. Yeah,
I've heard bits of that story before when we've spoken to Archie about it, but to hear that all through, and there's so much more about it. So we'll have to go off and have a pint now and hear the rest of that story. That sounds like a very good plan. Thank you very much for coming over. Great for coming and sharing the story. So thank you, everybody, for listening to that slightly different version of the SME Growth podcast today. Still hoping that we've given some value to all of you business owners and managers out there looking to solve your own struggles with growing your businesses, and hopefully have learned something from some of the stories that Archie's told us today about buying those 2 businesses and growing them the way he's described. As we ask you to every week, please forward a note, message, WhatsApp, whatever it is, tell your mate in the pub that we're here, spread the word, and in the meantime, good luck with your business.